Hi guys, welcome to this super useful interview that I think we have with the chair of the RCGP AiT committee, Anthony James, who's taking some time out, undoubtedly a really busy schedule right now with everything that's going on. Hi Anthony, how are you doing?
Hi, Aman. I'm really good. Yeah, thanks for having me on and taking the time to chat through. Yeah, like you say, what's been a really difficult and period of change for all trainees.
Yeah, it's been a super busy time in terms of the speed at which things have developed over the last couple of weeks, and it's really useful to have you on just to answer some common queries that I'm getting from trainees about exams, training, etc., and just to get the voice of the RCGP representatives of them. So, thanks for taking the time out. So, just tell me a little bit about how the last couple of weeks, months have been for you as chair.
Yeah. So it definitely has been the last couple of months has been a bit of a roller coaster. And I guess when I became chair of the committee back in November, I wasn't necessarily expecting to have this experience and to be facing some of the challenges that have been involved especially over the last couple of months.
Yeah.
I guess on a purely personal level, it's been a challenge, but I've also learned a lot about myself and hopefully how to be a bit of a better representative as well. So lots of positives have come out of it as well. And I hope that now where we are is in a positive place for all trainees who've been affected by exam cancellations.
Yeah, and it has been a tough time for trainees, right? There's no denying that. I guess right from the day when the announcements came of cancellation, and I think people knew it was coming for a couple of weeks that things were going to be cancelled. That was the direction of how a lot of things were going, but it was that bit of uncertainty that was there for a couple of weeks that kind of been easy, I guess, when even yourself probably wasn't sure what was going on.
Yeah, and I think it wasn't just me. I think nobody really knew when the final point would come when exams would have to be cancelled. The college was obviously in the middle of running a CSA diet when they were cancelled, and that was all based on government recommendations. Before that, they'd been doing no-touch exams, trying to reduce any risk that would be involved in delivering them. But obviously, when the new social distancing restrictions came into place, they did have to come to an end. So obviously, that's really frustrating that a lot of trainees might have missed out on sitting the exam by a few hours, and to then have to wait several months in a period of uncertainty, not really sure what the next steps were. I can totally appreciate would be really frustrating. For me, it was, personally, there was a lot of frustration involved. I was meant to do my CSA in the April sitting. So that obviously now hasn't happened. For me, I'm also less than full time and a bit out of sync. So meant to finish at the end of October. The new guidance that's come out obviously just runs to the end of September. So I can totally appreciate that for lots of less than full time or out of sync trainees, there's still a bit of uncertainty, which will only be adding to kind of the pressures that they're feeling in their working lives and everything else they're dealing with COVID at the minute.
Yeah. And we'll talk about both exams, I think, because there are questions coming in about both. And obviously AKT, it's been about a week now where we've had a bit of extra guidance and people are getting used to the new guidance. CSA obviously came out just yesterday, and I think some more guidance will probably come as time goes on for that. But we'll try and kind of pick up what we know so far. So things were cancelled and we had that period. Were things being looked at before that cancellation happened and processes started in terms of thinking about what's going to happen when this happens or if it happens?
Yeah, I think obviously everything was moving really quickly at that point, and there was a huge amount of uncertainty everywhere. And obviously a lot of people that work, particularly the clinicians that work at the college, are also jobbing GPs. So we're all dealing with their own issues in their clinical roles and personal lives, as well as everything that was going on at the college. So a huge thing for anybody to be dealing with, particularly then when you've got the added pressures of something as complex as exams. There definitely had been conversations that had started before that they had to be postponed about what are we going to do in this situation. But there were kind of no definite plans, which is obviously then why it's taken, in reality, a couple of months to reach the point that we're at now. Wasn't, I think, it's easy to look back and think, why was there not a solid plan in place before this all happened? But, nobody, not just in healthcare, but across all industries, was really prepared for this. And the college is, a really amazing, fantastic team with lots of people with a great skill set there, but still it's a relatively small team. So having to deal with what is a massive upheaval just does take a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes just putting it in context is really important. I mean, I suppose that human nature is that people want answers very quickly, and the scale of these exams and how they run and how the amount of people involved in the whole setup, it's a huge thing to change and shift, not just the style of an exam, but even things like dates, and even if it was the same exam on different dates, the whole logistics around it is huge. So things got cancelled. Personally, for yourself, things started to change in terms of your own stuff. And I had trainees both sides. I had trainees who were in the very final day before it all stopped, and then the people on the day after as well. So, and I guess mixed emotions from people who have just about got it done or just about missed out. So tell me, since then, we've obviously got some answers yesterday about CSA and AiT week before. How's the process been, and how's the AiT committee been involved in, I suppose, planning the future and looking at the changes?
Yeah, so I think I've been really proud of the work that like the AiT committee as a group has done over the last couple of months, and think that we've played a really important role in representing trainees' views during this period. So I guess once things were cancelled, then conversations did properly get underway around what would happen next. And there's a lot of, as you've already referenced, there's a lot of different players involved in any of those decisions. So obviously, if exams are cancelled, that could potentially impact on people's CCT dates. Yeah. That then brings in the need for potential training extensions, which brings in all of the statutory education bodies. It obviously brings in NHS England and the Department of Health, who at the end of the day are all involved in the funding of those kind of extensions. And then it also, if there's any changes needed to exams or other forms of assessment, then it brings in the GMC as well. So a huge number of different players, all with slightly different agendas, slightly different points of view. And so just kind of melding all of those groups together, getting people on the same page is always going to take a bit of time.
Yeah.
From my perspective, when things got cancelled, some of the groups that I was involved in brought together representatives of the college and things like CogPed and Health Education England, and those were meetings that were ongoing. And then there were lots of other kind of parallel discussions going on, some of which I was involved in, some of which I wasn't, between the college and the GMC, between the college and Health Education England, the Department of Health, NHS England, etc. And so it felt, in all honesty, like there were a lot of parallel conversations going on, but there wasn't a unified approach, which I think in this situation probably did add to a bit of the delay looking back on it. I don't think that's any one person's fault. I think that's just that's kind of the normal way that these things have been approached in the past, and that's understandable when we've had a bit more time to deal with. But in this situation where things were under such a tight time pressure, I do think potentially we did lose out on a bit of time at that point.
Yeah.
And then from my perspective, it felt that things were moving in a direction which could have ended up with lots of trainees being put in a position where they're effectively forced into an extension of their training without a clear end point, because no one knew when we would realistically be able to start running the CSA in its current format again. And we had set up lots of different groups over the last year to try and get a wider pool of opinion from trainees. Recently, we've had a group going on Telegram, which has now about 1,000 trainees in it, a lot of ST3s who've been affected by the exam cancellations. And the sense of frustration in that group and other channels since the cancellation was mounting and becoming at one point nearly palpable. And I was getting lots of messages, sometimes up to 100 personal messages a day, like over email or Telegram or WhatsApp or voicemails, etc., which is great. And I think it's testament to the fact that people did have a really strong reaction to this, understandably, but also was putting a lot of pressure on myself as well. I think it's really important to be open and accessible for trainees if you are a rep, but just even just getting back to people on a lot of those messages takes a lot of time. But because the sense of frustration was building, and it felt that even though I was trying to communicate back to trainees the conversations that were going on and why there was this process was taking a lot of time, people didn't necessarily feel that they were still getting the answers they needed, or that their views were being fed into the discussions or given as much weight as they should have been in those discussions. And I think on reflection, that's probably because I think it's one thing for trainees to talk to one another, even if it's as an elected rep, but if the same messaging isn't coming out from other levels within those organizations, so the senior kind of decision makers, then it doesn't necessarily reflect well to trainees. They think they are being excluded. The sentiment of trainees being involved doesn't quite get across. So I think that's something that was lacking early on in the discussions.
Yeah.
And then
And you did a great job to get back to get those into those discussions, I guess, because certainly, you were getting loads of messages. Same thing was happening to myself, and we deal with trainers every day, and a lot of questions are coming my way, and I didn't know where to turn and where to find the answers. So I could sense the frustration. And so then how did that go from there? Then did you kind of have to push to try and put those views back across, as in how did you go from there then?
Yeah, so I think the thing that made the biggest change was that we decided to do a survey of trainees' opinions, and that was something which lots of people ended up calling for, and my fellow reps ended up kind of convincing me that that was the right thing to do. And so we opened up a survey on a Wednesday afternoon, I think it was, and by the Friday we'd had about 1,000 responses, which again I think is amazing and testament to the strength of feeling that trainees had on this issue. Yeah. And again, I always say, like, thank you to everybody that took part in that survey, because it has made a massive difference. And then over that weekend, I spent some time looking through all the data, putting together a report summarizing the kind of key themes that had come out in that. And when I started putting the report together, I still wasn't necessarily sure what I was going to do with it. But as I read through all the data, and it became really apparent that trainees were 80% of trainees were very much opposed to any kind of training extension as a solution to this, and gave some really great insightful thoughts on how this problem could be solved. And so I thought, when that came together, we're obviously dealing in a time-limited situation. It felt that we'd reached a bit of an impasse, or that the direction of travel was potentially towards extensions, or at least not providing an alternative solution to get people their CCT. And it felt, obviously, like I've said, that all of these parallel conversations were going on. I decided to send that report out to all of the kind of leads in all of those organizations that we've already mentioned, plus the Department of Health, obviously Matt Hancock as the Secretary of State, and the Health Select Committee, who can obviously help provide scrutiny to the work of any kind of government or arm's length body. And in retrospect, I think that made a big impact by the end of the week. So we released that report on a Monday. By the end of that week, we had a big roundtable, which finally brought together all of the different decision makers from all of the different organizations involved, which was a huge achievement. Obviously, though, releasing that kind of report in that way has lots of other consequences. And I think in retrospect, for me personally, just thinking about how I handle situations, there's a lot of learning. Obviously, I think that one of the most important things that I want is to obviously represent trainee views, but I also need to have good working relationships with everybody at the college and other organizations to get things done. And perhaps releasing the report kind of in such a way without any kind of pre-warning left a few people shocked, I would say, and potentially they did have the right to have a look at that before I sent it out to a broader audience. So that's definitely learning. Any decision to kind of throw this type of grenade is going to have the potential to impact on trust and relationships, some of which is really difficult to rebuild. I hope that anyone that did feel annoyed or put out by the way that the survey was released recognizes that I did it from a place of feeling slightly backed into a corner with no other option, and was trying to do something for the benefit of trainees. But I can recognize that, it's a high stress, really stressful situation for everyone. Everyone was trying to do the best for trainees. But I guess the end result is that I do think that that report really helped move us to a better place, and has been one of the key things that has brought us to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I remember two things clearly. The time leading up to that, I suppose, those couple of weeks, that was when the frustration was at its peak, just because trainees did not know where their futures lay. And it was a really tough time, because they're obviously trying to deal with what was going on in their working environment as well, and then adapting to not knowing about exams. So I could sense that frustration building, but then you could see when that report was released, the amount of traction it got, almost a sense of relief that, okay, we're this is our views, and it's being looked at, and it is being taken seriously. And then things started to roll, and it's quite quickly after that, really, that the next few steps started to come out, isn't it? And I think it started with AKT.
Yeah.
So if you just give us a quick update about AKT and what's happening from that point of view.
Yeah, so a lot of the planning around the AKT had begun long before the report came out. And so now we're at a position where the AKT will start running again in July, and the college has been working with Pearson VUE centres to make sure that they can deliver them in a safe way. So with social distancing in operation to protect trainees and all of the staff that would be involved as well. So those will be going ahead. There is a prioritisation process in place, which the deaneries are leading on organising. So trainees should have been contacted about their intentions to sit those exams, so that they can that kind of prioritisation exercise can go on in the background, and it will be kind of priority given to people who are approaching their CCT dates earliest. I can appreciate that for other trainees, particularly ST2s, when a lot of people do want to sit their AKT, that might be frustrating, particularly when a lot of them will have started doing preparation before their exam was cancelled back in March. But I think we do have to recognise that this is an unexpected situation. We do have to try and get through those people who are closest to finishing training. They will be the priority, but the college is planning to put on additional diets of the exam to help everybody catch up over the coming months as well.
Yeah, I think I think generally, I mean, we do a lot of AKT training. We had to cancel a couple of courses for people who are going to do that April sitting. And I think most have understood that this first AKT exam in July is got to be based, I suppose, on those people who are going to be finishing earliest. And I think most trainees seem okay with that. There's a bit of query about when the second one would be, because obviously the next scheduled one is October, isn't it? And there's a bit of wondering, are we going to get another one in the summer? Any news on that? Any progress on whether that's going to happen or not?
Yeah, so there's definitely there is planning in the works to hopefully be able to offer additional diets before the traditional kind of October AKT sitting. Hopefully the details of that will be out fairly soon once it's all confirmed. But obviously, while like I say, the exams team at the college has incredible expertise, but is still relatively small, and so all of their energy at the minute is going into the delivery of the AKT and the development of the new RCA as well.
Yeah. And I suppose at the moment, just to wrap with AKT, people who are still being prioritized, aren't they? I don't think anyone has been given the go-ahead that, yes, you're in the first sitting or not. So I guess all the local areas are now working on those lists and to see who's going to actually take up those 450 places. So hopefully, I presume, be pretty soon that people will start to know that you're one of those 450, just to get preparation back on track, I suppose, because being in limbo is very hard for people to start getting back to work.
Totally. I think so. At the minute, all of the deaneries are still in the process of collecting the data. So for any trainees that are listening to this, if you've not received you should have received a survey over the last couple of weeks, which has asked about your exam intentions and your stage of training. If you haven't responded to that, but would like to sit the AKT or the RCA, then it's really important to fill that out. Otherwise, you might miss out on the prioritization process that's going on. Yeah. So in the next few days, those surveys will all begin to close. So again, time is important if you're intending to sit that and haven't already filled out the survey. Once that's done, then they'll obviously be able to collate all the data and then start offering people places. But as you say, nobody's actually in the position of being offered a definite spot on the summer AKT yet.
And just if trainees haven't heard, where are they going to contact the local area, or do they go to the national RCGP contact? Where's the best place to contact for that?
Yeah, so if you haven't received a kind of survey or any information, then the best people to approach are people in your deanery. So whichever health education body you're under, contact your local, even just go through your training program director, or if you know somebody that works at kind of a higher deanery level, contact them, because they're the kind of organisation that's arranging all of the surveys and collecting the data. So the college isn't involved in that side of the data collection.
Cool. And AKT format, style, coverage, number of questions, all that's identical to the normal AKT. There's no changes in the style of exam.
Yeah, it remains exactly like you say, the same style and format of the exam, just with fewer people able to sit it at any one time, just so that social distancing can remain in place.
Okay, and you might not know this, Anthony, but the next one, if it happens in the summer, will that be another prioritization-based thing? For example, people who booked in April who didn't get a chance to do it in the first sitting, or would that be open to all? Any idea on that so far?
I don't know the answer to that yet. I guess it will depend on who goes through in the first sitting, how many people pass and might need to resit. So once this once this sitting of the CSA is done and the results have all been calibrated and sent out to trainees, then they'll be able to properly release information around who can sit any future sittings of it.
Fine. Okay, and I guess the turnaround between exam and results will be quite fast if they're going to look at those to see how do they progress next. Okay, so that's AiT. I think most people have caught up with that. Let's talk about CSA then, because obviously yesterday a lot of information came out about RCA and the new assessment, and people are starting to get their head around what it's going to involve. But just from your point of view, in terms of how this all came about, tell us a bit about what options there were for CSA. And how it came out as this being the one that was chosen to go forward.
Yeah, so in the survey that we did, lots of trainees had put forward different suggestions on what they would like to see happen. And from then when we had that big roundtable meeting, the college came having put together its own list of suggestions based on feedback from that survey, but also other ideas that they'd had. And I think there were initially about 7 ideas that were put forward. Some of those included things like not doing the CSA at all and basing people's ability to get their CCT purely on their workplace-based assessments and their AKT, up to and that ranged from that kind of suggestion up to the introduction of the new exam, which we've seen. When it comes to the kind of the former ideas, so about not doing the CSA, it was quite clear from conversations that were happening with the GMC there at those meetings that wouldn't be felt able to meet the same standard. And the standard, obviously, for entering the GP register is kind of legally regulated. It's very strict. It's not something that anybody has any real desire to change, because I think the standards are important. And so it was felt that the GP curriculum couldn't be adequately assessed just by those two results, and so there would need to be some form of alternative assessment offered, which would allow those capabilities and curriculum areas to be assessed. So obviously the AKT examines a lot of the core knowledge that you need to be a GP. Workplace-based assessments are a form of how you kind of apply that knowledge, but are in some ways of kind of a subjective assessment based on just you and your trainer's relationship. And so the CSA was always meant to be an objective assessment as to how a trainee applies their knowledge in the context of like a patient relationship, managing communication skills and interpersonal skills. So they felt that something was needed to be able to show that. And so then the options that were put forward were quickly cut down. There were other options put forward, including things like a remote version of the CSA done over a webcam and regional CSAs, so done in different areas of the country. Yeah. A lot of the issues in terms of actually delivering those came down to the tight time pressures that we're under. Also, things like the regional CSA obviously requires a huge amount of logistics to find new exam centres, to find new acting companies, and to be able to set all of that up is really difficult, and doesn't in many ways avoid the key underlying issue around the potential risk of COVID, sticking to strict social distancing measures and protecting the health and safety of trainees, examiners, exam staff, and actors, all of which is really important. So we were kind of left with the result that felt to actually be feasible and would meet the required standards was this new assessment. So the recorded consultation assessment, which is in some ways similar to what was done before the introduction of the CSA back in 2007, I think it was. But with a big difference in that the new RCA is meant to reflect current practice, and obviously GP practice has changed a lot in the last few months, and is also meant to be kind of an examination of good, safe consulting, whereas the previous video assessment that was used before was 7 recorded consultations, but it was meant to be like a masterpiece assessment. These were meant to be the 7 perfect consultations. The RCA is not meant to be that. It's meant to be a realistic view of a trainee consulting in a safe and good manner, but in no way meant to kind of reflect the perfect consultation.
Okay, so obviously clearly a lot of work has gone around fixing this, and it's been kind of matched in certain features to the CSA, and the 3 domains are the same 3 that are going to be looked at. The curriculum spread is going to be as similar as you can make it. Still 13 recordings as opposed to 13 cases, and approximately 10 minutes, isn't it? Although it can't be, it's real life, so you can't make it exact. But was that deliberately done to try and map some of those things from the exam itself?
Yeah, so I guess that kind of comes back to standards again, and also making an assessment which is both valid and reliable. So 13 cases for the CSA has, if you ask kind of and I'm definitely not an educator or an academic in this area, so I won't be able to explain it as articulately as many other people.
Yeah.
But even the 13 cases in the CSA, if you ask kind of the experts and the kind of theorists about it, they would say that that's a compromise. And actually, the base number of consultations that should be assessed is around 26, and that means that because if you go any lower than that, then some trainees who should have passed will fail, and some trainees who should have failed will pass. So 26 is kind of like the optimum number to make it the most valid and reliable exam. Obviously, that's not feasible. It's like an unmanageable workload for trainees to be expected to do in an exam, and also logistically, it would be almost impossible to do. So 13 has always been felt to kind of be the compromise number. Going any lower than that would affect trainees, could enhance differential attainment and reduce the fairness of the exam, which is obviously something that is really important for trainees. So that's kind of why the 13 has been stuck to, and the 10 minutes is obviously meant to be a reflection of what you should be able to do in 10 minutes. But also it's obviously got to be recognized that CSA patients are very different often to real life patients. So it's not necessarily tallying up completely, but was felt to be the fairest option with the new assessment.
And how much of an involvement was yourself and RCGP AiT committee in the discussion about the new assessment for CSA and RCA and how it's all going to run?
Yeah, so the college set up an RCA core group. So that's experienced educators, examiners. They've got lay reps there as well, who've all been involved in the kind of core development of the assessment. And then we, as kind of myself as the chair, attend something called the Specialty Advisory Committee, which brings together the college, CogPed, Health Education England, and that kind of discusses some of the high level issues around the assessment. And then we've also been brought in to kind of ask advice on other specific elements of how the exam would be done, the kind of comms that is going out to trainees as well. Obviously that's taken a while to start getting out, but that was just because the development of such an assessment does take a bit of time, and it would felt unfair to start releasing information to trainees which then might change, only adding to the whole confusion around the situation. So we've definitely been involved. Obviously, we do have a bit of a conflict of interest. We can't be too involved in the formulation of the kind of exact details of the exam, particularly as someone who's going to have to sit it at some point, probably in the next few months. But we definitely, trainees have been involved throughout the whole process. Our needs, our concerns, any questions that have been coming into the college have all been considered in the development of the assessment, and hopefully we'll be able to continue releasing lots more information and updated FAQs over the next days and weeks as well.
And I guess since yesterday, you've been getting a lot of messages from trainees, and what kind of things are coming your way in terms of questions, doubts, fears?
So I think the biggest one, obviously there's still a bit of uncertainty around how people will upload these videos. And in the letter that went out, obviously it was made clear that the contract's been awarded to 14 Fish, who have also been developing the new trainee eportfolio. And we were kind of involved in some of the decision making on, or at least got a vote in who would would win that contract. And the solution that 14 Fish were putting forward seemed really user friendly, will allow trainees to upload both their own kind of recordings on their own device, as well as use the 14 Fish's specific app and platform to directly record consultations as well. So hopefully once that's out, it will be really easy to use and quite straightforward for trainees, which is also really important when we're dealing with such a short time frame. And I guess longer term, if the RCA did have to be used several times in the future, for it to be better integrated with the eportfolio kind of makes sense as well. So that's kind of one of the big questions is around the IT side of things, and hopefully we will have some more details on that over the next couple of days. Once the initial developments done.
You record on your phone, right? You can record your consultations using your own device, your own smartphone, and then basically upload it to a central system where it's looked at by CSA examiners and assessed.
That's the intention. Obviously, things are always have the potential to change. But that was the proposal put forward, was that you'd be able to upload your own files as well as use the 14 Fish's own app to be able to record stuff directly as well.
Yeah. And I guess, is there going to be any guidance for trainees coming out in terms of consent and how much consent needs to be done and in what format in order to do all of this?
Yeah, so the intention is that if you're using the kind of 14 Fish's own platform, it will prompt patients to offer consent and also give them the opportunity to withdraw consent as well if they want to. And then if you're recording stuff on your own device, then it would be a case of getting verbal consent at the beginning of the consultation, which won't be included in that 10-minute scoring window that you have, because obviously that can take a bit of time just explaining to patients what you're doing, why you're doing it. So that trainees shouldn't worry that that's something that will be counted in their kind of marking of any assessments they submit.
Okay.
So further guidance on that will be coming out, because I think that's the most important thing to get right, so that any assessments that people are recording can actually be included, and they don't find later on that there's an issue with the consent that they've got there.
Yeah. That's really useful, and it's good that more guidance is going to come out, because I think there are a lot of questions on that side. I think no one wants to do anything wrong and do anything that's not allowed, for example. So that'll be really useful.
I guess for now, people should just kind of follow the same advice that they do for the kind of audio video COTS that they've done. So, but just including a verbal consent at the beginning of the consultation as well.
Yeah, which makes sense, and they should be used to doing that anyway, as you said, isn't it, through things like COTS. Just to reiterate the time frame for the people doing the RCA, it's those who are due to finish before 30th of September, isn't it? Those are the ones who are definitely in that RCA window. Like people like yourself who are just out, have got a bit of a waiting game, I guess, right now.
Yeah, again, it comes back to a similar position as the AKT. I can totally appreciate that the priority has to be given to people that are due to CCT in August, or up to up to the end of September, and that will get through the big bulk of people who are needing to sit the assessment, and then obviously further guidance will be given, hopefully within the next few weeks, around those trainees who might be out of sync, so finishing any time after September, when they'll be able to sit an assessment. There is the potential that if COVID disappeared and there was no further worries about social distancing, then we could move back to the CSA. Obviously, at the minute, it feels like that's probably unlikely to happen anytime soon. And so, it's recognised by everybody at the college and all of the various educators as well at CogPed that trainees do need to be given sufficient notice before any decision would be made to switch between assessment formats. Because obviously for people like me, or who are finishing in October or afterwards, we would like to start being able to record some assessments, get used to doing that, as it might be something we're not too familiar with. So people will be given definite notice, and probably we're talking about kind of at least 3 to 4 months notice before any change to the assessment was done.
So that kind of ties in with the timeline question then. So obviously it's only come out yesterday and things are going to develop over the next few weeks, but when do we think that, say for example, people are CCTing in the normal time frame, so beginning of August, do you have any idea about when they would need to start submitting and how long that process would take in terms of marking, etc.?
Yeah, so I think definitely that is still in a bit of development. There's no definite deadline which has been decided on yet for when trainees would have to have submitted their videos by. It will, realistically be sometime in early July, just to allow, like you say, the time for marking to take place, for those exam results to be submitted, and for CCTs to be issued and people added onto the register. What can be done is that ARCPs can start going ahead, and if trainees have already passed the other segments that they would need to get their CCT, then when that final RCA result or AKT result comes through, their CCT can be fast tracked so that they can be done by their expected date. So so still, like, that the definite deadline is still definitely a work in progress, and will, I guess, be based on when 14 Fish's platform launches, providing enough time for trainees to realistically submit their assessments, also training examiners on the new system as well. But I think realistically it will be some point in early July, I think it's fair to say.
And 2 more questions that I've been getting from trainees who are specifically those who are due to finish in August. What happens do they get a choice in terms of, I would rather not do the RCA, I'd rather wait to do, I'm not really someone who wants to be recorded, I want to do my CSA and therefore potentially get an extension? And secondly, if I do the RCA and I don't pass and I'm due to finish in August, what happens then? Do I lose an attempt at the exam, or how does that work?
Yeah, so I think at the minute, the safest thing to say is that we can't guarantee when the CSA will take place again. So for the foreseeable future, unless government restrictions change, we should think that we're probably going to sit the RCA. Otherwise, just doing the CSA at the minute isn't safe, like we said, for trainees or examiners or RCGP staff. So I don't think people should think they're probably in the way that they won't necessarily have a choice around it. So starting to prepare for the RCA, it would be good advice. If trainees have specific concerns about not being able to prepare, not having enough time, feeling really kind of uncertain around whether they would be able to be successful in any kind of assessment at the minute, then that's definitely a conversation that they should be having with their trainer. And if they couldn't sit the assessment in the necessary time frame, then that would obviously trigger an extension to their training, as would happen through the kind of normal processes that exist. So I think that's important for trainees to hold on to, is the fact that everybody recognizes that this is an unusual time, and that people's training will have been impacted. If you don't feel kind of able to prepare or well prepared to sit assessments in a minute, that's a conversation that you should start having with your trainers sooner rather than later, I guess, just to kind of let everybody be aware of that. When it comes to people sitting the actual assessment, though, again, it has been recognised that this has been a really unusual time, and everybody's training will have been impacted, potentially negatively. And so for anybody that sits either the RCA or the AKT up until the 30th of September, this will be kind of a no judgment sit at the exam. So it won't count towards the normal normal number of 4 tries at each assessment that you'd normally be given. So say you were on your last chance, this was your final time of being able to sit the assessment, you would still get another time after this to be able to sit. So this should be definitely seen as like a non-judgment sitting. If you fail, it won't be held against you or count towards your normal number of attempts.
And that's really, really useful to know. And that's both AKT and CSA RCA. That's for both.
Yeah, so for a single sitting, so say you sat the AKT in the July date that's already been announced, and then they announced another date in August, and then you sat that one and failed again, that one would count as an attempt. I see. But for a single sitting of either assessment, then it will be a kind of a no judgment attempt.
Okay, that's really useful to know. And as you said, there's going to be a lot of guidance coming out, I presume, for trainees, but trainers as well, in terms of not just the technicalities of the exams, but I suppose how to support trainees and what kind of additional resources might be useful. And I guess that's going to be a developing thing that goes forward. But for trainees, where is, because one thing I've heard from trainees in the last couple of months is they're not quite sure where to go in terms of getting advice. They're looking at Twitter, they're looking on the website, they're looking at various places. And things have come out in little bits and drabs here or there, and then they're worried about, well, which is the right information and what is the absolute information. So what would you recommend as RCGP chair is the place that trainees should be focused on in terms of getting up-to-date information?
I think the RCGP website is always going to be where the actual kind of truth is held. So obviously there are other bits of information that might get out here and there from other sources, which sometimes is accurate information, but often hasn't been accurate information. So I would definitely say to trainees that until you've seen it definitely published on the RCGP's website, don't take it at face value. There might be some things that might be inaccurate in the information you've heard, or might change before it's published on the RCGP website. So I would keep an eye on there. Obviously keep an eye on your emails as well, as lots of information will be released by both the college and health education bodies as well. But both of those, I would say, are the most reputable sources of information. I'm posting regularly on social media, on our Telegram group. So I do only post things that have kind of already been released elsewhere, or that have been given the green light. But sometimes we can have a bit more of an informal discussion around some of the specific technicalities of the information that's released as well on those platforms. So if people want to join up to either of those, then they're welcome to as well.
And I think you've been really trainees have got a lot of information from yourself. I think it's been really useful to get some quite quick information coming out from your Twitter stream and from yourself, which is really helpful for people, I think. And the initiative you've taken to try and get things like surveys and things done has really, I think, benefited a lot of trainees who are clearly worried and stressed and anxious right now. But how have you found it as chair? I mean, as you said, you didn't expect any of this to happen in your in your sitting, as it were. But
Yeah,
learning experience, I guess.
yeah, it's been a really interesting experience. I think, there's definitely been some sleepless nights and certain stresses involved, but I've got to say that I felt amazingly well supported by my fellow reps, also by other trainees. So on any of the groups like Telegram or other platforms that I'm on, people have been really, really supportive, and that's massively appreciated and makes the whole thing a lot easier. And it's just important to recognize that you're doing things which people definitely recognize are benefiting them. For me, sometimes when you're as a rep, it's difficult to know if you're doing the right thing. So to be getting that kind of feedback from trainees has been really important. And also for me, I became a rep at the college because I didn't necessarily understand what the organization did. I wanted to get a better insight into who this organization was, where my money was going, what was the point of them.
Yeah.
And I became a rep now, like just over 18 months ago. And I've always found them a massively supportive, nurturing environment, which has only been, kind of amplified tenfold since I became chair. And even though some of the decisions that I've made over the last couple of months might have been difficult for the college and put some people in some difficult positions, they've still always been massively well supported, had the opportunity for like mentoring and coaching and stuff from senior people at the college and people who've been involved in the past as well. And so for all of those people, I just want to also say a massive thank you for everything they've offered. The reality is that all of us are working towards the benefit of trainees. Sometimes people might need a bit of a push or a bit of a information putting in front of them to say this is what trainees are feeling, and to continue to put pressure on people. But nobody has ever been trying to do something which disadvantages trainees or kind of persecutes them. But this is just a really complex situation, but hopefully we're in a positive position now.
And I guess you've heard from hundreds and maybe thousands more trainees than you would have heard from if this whole thing hadn't happened. So I guess from all parts of the country, you've been getting messages and queries and doubts.
Yeah, I mean, it's been great because when I started, the committee was not in a bad position, but we'd lost a lot of reps had finished. We hadn't necessarily recruited too many new people. And over the last few months, we've now got over 60 reps around the country. A lot of those are kind of new reps who've obviously had to deal with becoming a rep under challenging circumstances as well. We've got a really good geographic spread. They've all been doing amazing work at kind of collating views locally and feeding them back to us centrally. And it's been just really, really rewarding to be part of such a great group. And also just trainees have been at the heart of all of this, so not just reps but wider trainees. It is their voices and opinions which have really moved things on to where we are now. So I think it's just been to me a great example of what you can do when you effectively engage as a group and come together. So that's been a really nice experience and a great learning opportunity for me as well.
That's really good to hear. And day in, day out, I have contact with trainees through all walks of life, and it's been a challenging time for them. So it's really good to see that you've got their back and you're trying to push things along in with them in mind, I suppose, which is key. But what about going forward then? So obviously lots of changes are still going to happen, but from an RCGP AiT committee and then as a chair, what do you think your role is going to be over the next couple of months going forward?
Yeah, so I think obviously the COVID is very far from being done and could potentially throw up lots of other new challenges for trainees. The college has just launched a new consultation on what we think the world of general practice is going to look like in a post-COVID world. So obviously it's really important for us to have early career and trainee GPs involved in shaping that project because, the reality is that we're going to be people that are living with those changes. And I think a lot of reps have been great at kind of pointing out that this is a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity for a new generation to really take hold of the direction of general practice. So we're going to be quite heavily involved in that. And I think from my point of view, this has been a great experience of how to engage a large number of trainees in a decision-making process. So I'm really keen to take that forward and make sure that as many trainees as possible have the opportunity to feed into that and any other projects we're involved in and feel really connected to the organisation. That's what I wanted for my year as chair, was to make people feel more connected as a group, not just to the college, as a group of trainees as a whole, to feel more like a community, but also to give them more of an insight into the college and the work that the organisation does and how they can shape that. So I'm hopeful that the skills that we've learned and the networks and communities that we've built over the last couple of months, we can continue to build and take forward to kind of shape all of that work as well. So that's probably what we're going to focus on over the immediate future. We've got some other key priorities that relate to things like international medical graduates, to continuing to build that sense of community through new kind of events and media outputs. And again, just to kind of create a more open and accessible college which works for trainees and then kind of early career GPs as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a great relationship with the RCGP AiT committee. I've been lucky enough to teach some people as they come through in the previous years, and Amit, the previous chair, I had a good relationship with. So it's been good to keep that going, really, and see how we can support you guys and help as much as we can. And there's nothing like a crisis to bring people together, right? And to look for opportunities. And as you said, the trainees of today are the GPs of an imminent tomorrow, and the amount of things that people will have picked up in terms of working collaboratively, efficiently with technology, that there's so many more things that we can learn from this challenge. And yes, exams for many trainees are the thing on their mind right now, but they will come and they'll go, and there's more to pick. And I think the AiT committee are doing great in being able to shape that going forward as well, which is brilliant.
Yeah, I think our key, obviously we always are involved in those decisions around training, curriculum, etc. But I think one of the unique things about the AiT committee, which is slightly different to, say, Health Education England reps or the BMA, is that we work in an organisation which is all about championing the future of the profession and thinking about what the next stage of the profession's development is going to be about. So I think as reps, one of our key roles is all around that championing of general practice, kind of thinking about the future and helping to shape that. So I think that's been a really great opportunity for me to be involved in. I know lots of my other reps feel very similarly. And so for me, it's just really nice whenever we get new people who have an interest sparks in what the college is doing and how they can shape the organisation. So I think, like you say, it's all about collaboration, both with other trainees, but also other people doing great work in different areas of healthcare as well.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think another thing that comes out of crisis and times of difficulty is people wanting to step up and make a difference and get involved. So if people, even at this time, challenging time, want to get involved with the AiT committee, what's the best way of doing that at this time, given that things have changed in so many ways?
Yeah, so we're definitely always looking for new members, and we're happy to take on kind of new reps. There were kind of different rules until this year around how you could join the AiT committee. There used to be kind of lots of different elections taking place to become a rep. We've now got rid of those, and it's a much more open process. So we're really looking for anyone who is kind of passionate or engaged or just has an interest and would like to learn more to come forward. At the minute, they can just email me, which they can either email me, it's just anthony.james@rcgp.org.uk, or they can email the chair email account, which is ait.chair@rcgp.org.uk. And then we can have a conversation about how they can best get involved in what's happening in their local area via their faculty, and how they can feed into the work the national committee is doing as well.
Amazing. And I think, well, firstly, thank you for coming on and doing this, because hopefully a lot of questions that people have been answered and clarified. Yes, there's a lot of stuff we don't quite know yet that will change over the next couple of weeks, and that's just the nature of being in a pandemic like this, where things change on a day-to-day basis. But thank you so much, Sandy, for taking some time out. Any final messages you want to put across to trainees who this is going to go out to?
Yeah, so I think just a couple of things. One is that any new type of assessment is always going to have some anxiety associated with it. But do just remember that the RCA is testing all the same skills and capabilities that the CSA would have been doing. So you spent the last 3+ years preparing for this, and you definitely will have the skills needed to be able to sit this exam successfully. So just hold on to that and keep preparing. We're going to have lots more resources coming out over the coming weeks to help support you in that. And then secondly, again, just a massive thank you for everybody that's taken a really active role in getting us to this position now. It has been massively affirming to see the change that you can make when a group comes together. And I hope that we can all hold on to that sense of community and connectedness to make further changes, not just to training, but the future of general practice moving forward.
Amazing. Andy, thank you so much for your time. And I'm sure we'll catch up and hope another one of these in a few months when we have a few more answers.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds great.
Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.